New developments in the Middle East with a resurgent al-Qaeda in Iraq. We turn to two key senators. From Oklahoma, James Inhofe, he's the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, and from Maryland this morning, Ben Cardin, a member of the Foreign Relations Committee. Senators, welcome back to Fox News Sunday. Thanks so much for joining us. As we start off this segment, Senator Inhofe, why don't we start with you? Just your thoughts on the passing of Ariel Sharon.
Well, mine are quite different, John, because we had an unusual relationship. In fact, it was even written up in the Jerusalem Times that he and I, on two occasions, actually sat down, spent an hour together, and prayed together. Now, that's an unusual relationship with someone, but it's one that was very genuine, very real, and I had a true love for him.
Senator Cardin?
Well, Ariel Sharon was really one of the great military leaders of Israel since 1948. And I think more recently, he was the one willing to take risks for peace in the Middle East. His leadership was invaluable for Israel's history and future. So I treasure the opportunities I had to meet with him when he was in Israel, when he was in the United States and I was in Israel. But one of the great figures in Israel, and really paved the way for, we hope, peace in the future.
All right. Let's move on to Iraq, where 13 more people were killed today in a couple of car bombings in the heart of Baghdad. Islamic extremists believed to be behind those. Senator Inhofe, on Thursday, you tweeted, quote, "The issues in Iraq are threatening to undo all that our men and women in uniform have fought for as al-Qaeda is resurgent, taking over Fallujah and Ramadi again." Who's to blame here, Senator Inhofe?
Well, I'm not going to say who's to blame now. I'd rather look at how can we correct it. We tried very hard back when President Obama pulled out to get him to leave such things as surveillance, intelligence, logistics, training. That's the type of thing that we can do. We've trained them already over that period of time. In Oklahoma, my 45th, were very much involved in that. So they're great warriors, but you can't just leave them and not have the intelligence and the logistics there with them. So that's what we're encouraging them to do now. If you look at Anbar province, of the 4,486 men and women who have died, Americans, a third of them were in Anbar province, and that's right now, it looks like that has been taken over. It's one that we can reverse that with a little bit of the type of help that I'm suggesting.
Senator Cardin, there's a lot of I told you so going on here. Senator McCain really is leading that charge. Is that justified? And what about the 2004 battle for Anbar province? All those Marines who fought so bravely and so many of whom lost their lives. Was that all for nothing?
Well, first of all, the Iraqis have to take responsibility for defending their own country, and the Iraqi government must respect the different ethnic communities within Iraq. And a good deal of the problems today is internal security, and it's a government that does not respect and try to bring together all the people of Iraq. Yes, they're extremists and they're terrorists, and we need to work together to root that out. But I think the fundamental problem is whether the Iraqis will take responsibility for their own country. So,
Senator Inhofe, the White House says it's going to send Hellfire missiles and other munitions to the Iraqi government. They haven't decided yet whether or not they're going to go after these militants in Fallujah and Ramadi. But outside of supplying them with arms, is there anything else the United States can do? The White House has ruled out sending U.S. forces back in.
Oh, yeah, John. As I mentioned, the intelligence and the logistics, those are the things that they need to have to back them up. Now, I'm glad that the president is now reversing a previous decision and is willing to sell them. They have money. They can buy some of our equipment, some of our arms, F-16s, for example, but they got to be trained to fly them. So training is a very important part. You look, I was over in Fallujah during the time that, remember the fingerprints and all of that? These people were risking their lives for their freedom, and I think that, you know, I think that they're going to be pulling out. They do need our help. We don't want boots on the ground. I know Ben doesn't either, but we do want to share our intelligence, logistics, and training with them.
Let me move on to a couple of other topics we're going to want to discuss today. Benghazi coming up, but also the new Robert Gates book called Duty. Senator Cardin, he paints a fairly unflattering portrait of the White House and President Obama's respect or lack of it for the military, his suspicion of military leaders, and saying that when it came to certain elements of the war in Afghanistan, the president just wanted to seem to disown it and get out. To you, are the former Secretary of Defense's observations credible?
Well, John, first of all, Secretary Gates is well respected for the service to his country, particularly as Secretary of Defense. It's very interesting in his book, he gives high praise to President Obama in making decisive decisions. And just about every decision he made, Secretary Gates agreed with. So the bottom line was that there was more harmony than you would think the headlines on the critique of his book. The one area where he talked about the frank discussions that took place in the White House, that's President Obama. And I think that's good, that he welcomes diverse opinions. But I think it's unfortunate we now see it in a book. It looks like in an effort to make the book more popular on the newsstands.
Senator Inhofe, you said late last week that you were not a fan of Robert Gates, but you're becoming one now.
Yeah, that's right. Well, first of all, to me, the most revealing thing was the exchange that Hillary Clinton and Obama had when they each one admitted to the other one that during the surge in Iraq, both of them had their decisions made through from political motivation. And I think that was really revealing, and to me, that draws a distinction because, you know, Bob Gates was also in that position under a Republican.
Do you think,
so
Senator, that hurts her
that
chances?
comparison.
Do you think that hurts her if she decides to seek the presidency in 2016?
Yeah, I do. I do. I think that for her to say that of course, she may deny it. I haven't heard any response from her. The fact that I haven't heard anything from her leads me to believe she probably won't. But to be politically motivated to make those very significant decisions, I think is going to be very damaging to her.
Senator Cardin, do you agree?
No, this is the type of talk that, or after the fact, President Obama was opposed to us entering the war in Iraq, as I was opposed to it. Secretary Clinton, as a senator, voted for that. I think they were talking about the primary elections where issues get talked about, but I don't think anyone questions the sincerity of Secretary Clinton. In fact, Secretary Gates was extremely complimentary of the role that Secretary Clinton played as Secretary of the State.
Senator Inhofe, Gates did say...
Ben is right. Ben is right. That was during the primary, and the primary at that time looked like it was going to be between Obama and Hillary. And yet, both of them agreed that they made those as political decisions. I think it's going to come back and hurt her.
Right. Senator Inhofe, Bob Gates also said that Vice President Joe Biden has been wrong on every foreign policy issue for the last 4 decades. You served with him in the U.S. Senate as a colleague for a number of years. Do you think that Bob Gates is correct on that point?
Well, you know, he's a real gracious person. I had a long conversation with the vice president the other day when I had a loss in my family, and we talked for over an hour. Now, I have debated him in years past on on issues where I have disagreed with him, and so I can't say that he's been wrong on everything, but I've disagreed with him on most things.
Right, and Senator Cardin, it's certainly not unusual, not unprecedented for administration officials, former administration officials, to write scathing tell-all books while the administration still holds office. But in this case of Bob Gates, do you argue at all with the timing of the release of this book?
Well, I do. I mean, I think there is some question here, and I think candid discussions with the president are important. I think reading about it in a book can only harm those types of discussions in the future. In regards to Vice President Biden, I served with Vice President Biden. I still do. He's still the president of the Senate.
Yep.
Yeah, so he is, his views are widely respected in the United States Senate and among the people in Washington. I think about New START and the ability of getting that agreement with Russia. We would not have gotten it but for the hard work of Vice President Biden. So he's been a trusted advisor and a person who I think is very solid on these issues.
In the couple of minutes we have left, I'd like to turn to Benghazi. Of course, the State Department designated Ansar al-Sharia and some of its subordinates in Libya as terrorist organizations. Also, the man Qatala, who is believed to be the mastermind behind the attack in the consulate there in Benghazi. Senator Inhofe, you took particular issue with the New York Times article, which said that there was no al-Qaeda connection between the attack on the consulate and al-Qaeda. What do you say about that?
Well, it was clearly the attack, particularly in the annex, was clearly an organized terrorist attack. There's no question about that. In fact, Obama's own CIA director, John Brennan, used the word unequivocal. It's unequivocal. It was a terrorist attack. The same thing with the National Intelligence Director, James Clapper. These are both appointees in answer to the president. They said it was a terrorist attack, and so did Secretary of Defense, Leon Panetta. So I think the top three advisors on military and foreign, you know that the president knew that right after the annex took place, and yet he sent Susan Rice to the Sunday shows, including the one we're on right now, to tell the American people something that just wasn't true, to try to keep this issue of the problems of organized terrorist activity subverted.
Senator Cardin, is there any question in your mind that there was an al-Qaeda connection to one of the attacks in Benghazi, if not the consulate, then at least the annex, as Senator Inhofe is suggesting?
My focus is to use what happened in Benghazi to make sure that we keep our personnel and our embassies as safe as we possibly can.
Understood, but do you believe there was an al-Qaeda connection there with the attack?
You know, there's been a lot of studies that have been done. I think there was multiple factors. It wasn't just one episode that took place in Benghazi. It was at different places. I think it's more complicated than just one connection.
But do you believe that there was some al-Qaeda involvement?
I know there was extremist involvements. Who they were associated with is a matter that I'm not quite clear on.
All right. Senator Ben Cardin, Senator Jim
John,
Inhofe.
Yes,
one last
They're very specific about Ansar al-Shari being there, and of course he is a well-known organizer.